Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about breaking code. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, how do I stop my coworkers with less experience from breaking my code? Ooh, yeah, this is gonna be hard. Honestly, I don't really know. Well, I can give you some tips, but I don't think you can. Like, not really, or rather you can, but the question is, will you like yourself if you do, like, or will you even have a job if you do the thing that might be required in order for you to do this in an effective manner? Because this very much depends on who you are, what company do you work in, like what practices do you have. There's so many ducks to get in a row in order to make this work. Usually the way that I've seen this go is one of two ways. These are the normal ways that a software developer who is more experienced, or it doesn't have to be someone necessarily who's more experienced, it just has to be someone who has invested in a solution of some sort of written some type of code. So there's usually two paths. You can go the like the soft skill way, like going really on the soft skills and trying to write really clean, maintainable code and do knowledge sharing and stuff of that nature. I will talk about that. And you can go the fascist way, or the senior way, or like leverage experience if you have that, or like basically if you have a strong enough presence within the company, which is the case for a lot of the more senior developers, and when they're dealing with less experienced coworkers, you can just go by force and like enforcing things, and that is a way. It works. It can, like, you can do that in many ways. You can do it in a really bad way that can really damage both your position at the company, but also your coworkers' relationship to you, and like there's so many things that can go wrong with this. But if you do it well, it can also work really good. If you can get an organic mentor student type of situation going and kind of mentor people into the right mindset, that is probably the best way that you can possibly, that's a really good setup, I would say. So let's talk about these two. Okay, so let's talk about the soft way first, the fluffier way. So the fluffier way would be for you to make sure that you have a fairly good understanding of the people who are working in your company. This is where these soft skills and business skills and social skills, like all this bigger perspective, really comes into play when you're writing software. And this is so hard. It's really hard. But if you can do that, you can create a process of developing a specific feature in a way where you include the people who are very likely to touch it, uh, and actually craft something that is very comprehensible to all the people involved. Now, the problem with this is that if you have a genius idea, if you really have a clear vision and you want to do something that is a little bit out there, or let's say that you're extremely experienced and you have to deal with you have people who are not so experienced, or people who have a widely different way of wanting to do things, or there's a mismatch. And in some cases you might have, say, junior coworkers who don't really know, like they don't really know how to deal with this, but they have very strong opinions. Then this is it's nigh on impossible, because whatever you produce is going to be at some point it's going to be out of your hands. You're going to go on vacation, you're going to be in, like on working on something else, somebody needs to pick up a store which is touching your code, and there goes the neighborhood. There's not much you can do here apart from trying to, like, be in some cases it's going to be endless conversations, or spend tons and tons of time trying to influence people and write software that is, as I like to say, the biggest mistake of a guru, whoever, like, even if you are the most genius person in the world, if you create a solution that is that's not comprehensible to the consumer, and in this case the consumer is other software developers, your solution is not going to be received in the right way. It's like developing any product. If you develop a genius new invention and nobody understands how it works, then nobody's going to buy it. And if you develop very, very advanced supercode that nobody really understands, well, either they're not going to be able to do any work, so they're going to try to not use the thing you made, or they're going to mess it up. If they can't get around the problem, they're just going to try to hack it together because they don't know what's going on. And this is an endless and I think almost impossible battle that you will fight. The only time I've seen a sustainable solution to this problem is if you look at the model that some of the open source projects have, where basically you create a single source of like a single point where whoever wants to contribute, they need to go through that screening process. It slows contributions down, and most companies, you can create models where this will work, but for most companies this is just not sustainable, because you can't basically sit and wait until some master pro. It can work, of course, but it slows a lot of the autonomy down, and it creates other problems when you want to move really fast. If you have a single process that everybody needs to go through, a gateway to get your code into the master branch. In open source, you can have that. An example would be, say, the Linux Foundation and like Linus Torvalds and so forth. Like, it's not that only that structure, that specific project, but that's an example of such a project where if you want to add things to the standards, you have to go through a lot of process to do that, which includes handing your code up for review to people who are extremely experienced and have basically final say on what you're going to do. But in a company, that usually doesn't work. Well, it does happen, which is the thing we're going to talk about. It does happen and it can work, but it is extremely hard to make it work because, as I said, all that really needs to happen is that you're sick and your coworkers can't sit around and wait for you to come back. So what you really need to make this work is education, knowledge sharing, pair programming, and like spreading your vision, if that makes sense, and try to get people on the same page. And it takes a lot of effort to do that. Second thing is, all right, you have seniority. You can try to force the situation. So what you can do is that you can, because there are some things that you will be able to control. In other words, if somebody's touching a piece of logic or they're doing something or something, like if you keep your eye on the things that matter, like if you pick your piece of the software, if that makes sense, you can basically enforce standards there, because the thing is, even if somebody messes it up, you can go in and fix it later. And you can, this is very dangerous, guys. You should know this, because I've seen so many senior developers who intimidate people into doing what they want. And it's a very I mean, sure, the code is probably going to meet their standards, but it can also damage the productivity and the overall happiness. It can kill the mood. If you are someone who can if you have a high level of social skills and you know how to talk to people so that they can see your point, and you have seniority, it is possible for you to guide people. In other words, you can be the gateway for getting the code into the master branch by just involving yourself, by just making sure that whenever somebody makes a pull request to that specific project or that specific thing, you're there with the voice, influencing the decisions. And in many cases, people, if you have seniority, a lot of the people will listen to you. But it's a very dangerous position as well, because you don't want to get yourself into a position where like you become this know-it-all person who enforces your will like a fascist or something like that, because that might come back and bite you. In some companies they are going to allow you to do that, I'm very sorry to say, but in some companies they're going to fire you for such behavior. And then you have to ask yourself, is the code quality that important that you're going to lose the job, and therefore by extension the code? Is it really that important? So the best thing here, I think, is if you can isolate the piece that you care about, like the stuff that you're working on, and anybody who is going to work on that code, if you can create a really good relationship with that person and they can guide them through the reason why you want them to do things in a certain way, you can make that work as well. But overall, I think that even this it's really hard, as I said, because all that it really takes for this to fall together is that, well, you're not around, or maybe the person that you're talking to is a very strong-willed person who doesn't really listen to you. And unless you have a way of, as I said, unless you can intimidate them, which is probably not a good thing, yeah, you always run that risk. So what I want you to take away from this is that I don't think that there's a really efficient silver bullet way to keep people from breaking code or like to create these sorts of issues. And this I think is this is why it's so hard to work in software or to maintain software over time, because you have different skill levels touching the same code base. And there are many models for how you can solve this. You can have like super talented developers do certain things, like you try to group like based on features and have people who are extremely good at something take care of one piece of the thing, and that could work, and then others consume it. But at the same time, that's a trade-off, because that's in many cases slower, or like it might be efficient in another way. Or you can have the crowdsourcing type of thing where you try to just knowledge share and you try to raise everybody up, so you keep everybody at sort of the same level, and then you just try to raise the whole thing, right? That is another way. The problem is that even with that, you're not going to produce perfect code. Honestly, I wish I could give you a better answer to this, but I don't think that there is an efficient way for you to keep yourself from having people breaking your code. The best method, I believe, is for you to create a very intimate dialogue. Like, know your stuff, and make sure that when you start writing something, include other people in the process of that creation. Try to sell a vision. Try to knowledge share and make people see the way that you are thinking about this problem, and try to get them into the same mindset. Don't just create a solution. Make sure that people understand why you're doing this and where you're trying to get the code to. Because if they can see where you're heading with this, they might be able to follow along more readily. And if worst scenario happens, you can always rewrite it. Well, in many cases. Have a great day.